Telling stories is what I do, and sometimes you come across the sad ones. And the life lessons we learn from them are just as important as the happy ones, maybe even more so. Why? Well, because adversity is a great teacher. There's a lot we can learn from our grief. And the woman you are about to meet knows all about it. She has experienced traumatic loss multiple times throughout her life and is now living with what she says is a broken heart. She chronicles her losses in the book Reminiscing, La Vie en Rose, a memoir of true stories. And guess what? It's filled with humor too, heartbreak, and lots of inspiration. Faith and family have always sustained this exceptional woman. And truth be told, I've known her for many years. And after years of unwinding trauma, writing has become, I'm going to try this again. Faith and family have always sustained this exceptional woman. After years of unwinding trauma, writing has become her vehicle to express this emotional journey. Molly Hanna Glidden believes that strength and hope come from putting one foot in front of the other and surviving another day. This is her story. Molly, welcome to the story behind her success.
Thank you for having me, Candy.
It's so good to see you. And truth be told, you and I have known each other for about 15 years.
Yes,
I was trying to do the math on it.
We have.
And I never knew that Molly was your nickname.
It was my nickname. I wanted it to be my real name.
You were born into a big Irish Catholic family. Your birth name was Mary.
It was.
Can you take us back to that time in your life? It was a simpler time, wasn't it?
It was very simple back then. And, when I think of my name as Mary, I never really heard it at home. There was a big, large family, and it wasn't until I met the nuns in first grade that they said to me, no, we're not going to use Molly, which is your home name. We're going to stick with Mary here. And I remember, rebelling.
Yeah, but take us back to, paint me a picture of your house, lots of kids running around.
Yes.
You grew up in a small town called Natick, Massachusetts. Take us back to that time in your life.
Well, it was really wonderful back then. We, everybody was doing their own thing, and my mother mostly was doing all the work at home, which they did in those days. Dad was more the disciplinarian, and so we looked out one after each other. We just always took care of each other, and we had very good parents. We were very lucky.
Your mother gave birth to twins.
She did.
One of them died at 8 months. You were in the second grade.
Yes.
Your first of many brushes with death.
Yes.
What do you remember about that day and your family's reaction to the loss of a child named Judith, but her nickname was Jill?
Well, I remember mostly the sadness that just surrounded my home. And, of course, at that age, you don't retain a lot, but, all of a sudden, my little sister, Jill, they called our twin sister and brother, Jack and Jill, and we enjoyed that. So all of a sudden, she wasn't there anymore, and it was not something anybody would talk about. My parents tried to protect us from the fact that she had passed away. But my dad did try to talk to us and said she was with the angels, and there was a lot of expression of someday we'll all be together. And that's when I started believing in my faith that, someday I'm going to be up with the angels. And I started my beliefs back then.
You married very young. Can you talk about your first husband and the birth of your daughter, Laura?
Yes, we were young. We were right out of high school. I got married, and I had my daughter right away. And my husband worked hard. Everything was secondhand. It wasn't easy. And we made it through for 9 or 10 years. But, being in the 60s, there was a lot of freedom. And my husband did his own thing. And our values just weren't the same. We weren't the same. So after working hard at the marriage, we decided when we were in the 10th year of our marriage that, we couldn't go on any further. And I really believed, I didn't know it at the time, but my husband suffered from depression, and he didn't have good contact with my daughter in the way that I felt was normal. And so when he walked away with a woman who I think there was jealousy, and she moved out of state with him, had 2 children, and none of them ever looked back. And it was sad for my daughter.
It's so sad because it feels almost as if he started a whole new life and it didn't include Laura.
It didn't include her.
Describe Laura's personality to our listeners, because there are lots of fun stories. Boy, did she walk early, like 7.5 or 8 months, right? Tell us a little bit about your girl.
She kept me busy. She walked really at 7.5 months. I couldn't believe it. She was determined. I caught her on a bike one day. It was a neighbor's bike, and it was 4 times taller than her. And it
So
had
she
the
was
finger
fearless.
brakes, and she fearless. She was standing up on the bottom without being able to sit, riding down a hill, and that was my first scare.
Yeah.
So.
But she was really outgoing, right?
She was
and
outgoing.
loved a good
Yes.
conversation even.
Yeah, she really did. She had a great personality. She really did.
Your sister Martha and you were also very close, and you lost her before her 25th birthday.
Yes, and that's another very sad story you would read about. We got close when the two of us we both married young, and so we both had girls. She had 2 girls, I had 1 girl. And so we developed a really good relationship. Unfortunately, her marriage didn't work. Something was going on with Martha. And when I look back now, I never realized the terrible things people have. Sometimes mental illness creeps in, and you realize there's depression and anxiety. And she just wasn't coping well. But the sweetest personality. I miss her like crazy today. But she decided to come over to my house, and I don't know whether she was trying to be saved by me, but she took the wrong medicine. And I spoke with doctors afterwards, and they said, had she taken anything else, she would have survived. But she took a medicine that a doctor prescribed her that sticks like glue in the stomach. You can't pump it out. She was in the hospital 10 minutes, 15 minutes later, and it didn't work. And so she had brain damage, and the whole family walked day and night over to the ICU to see my sister, who we knew was not going to make it. So it felt a lot like it was on me. However, I know she came to me for it was comfort she was coming for. And
in the book, you tell the story about how she literally had almost like a vacant look on her face when she got to your house that day.
Yes.
And you were making dinner, and she excused herself, went in the bathroom, and took a whole bottle of pills.
Yes.
And within a few days, after many attempts to save her life, she was dead.
She was gone.
Not even 25.
No.
Such a stigma about mental illness. You've already shared the fact that your first husband probably suffered from depression. Clearly, Martha was depressed.
Yes.
But back then, boy, if you think there's a stigma around mental illness now, nobody talked about it.
It wasn't talked at all. There was shame in the whole town.
Yeah.
In that whole town of Natick, there must have been 7 or 8 at the same time of the kids the same age in the early 20s. And we couldn't believe that it was like a cluster of them. I'll never forget that.
You've mentioned that you felt like maybe it was your fault, that you should have done something.
Yeah.
How did you handle that loss of Martha in your life?
I think this is how I developed my writing, because I could not speak. You didn't talk about it in those days. So writing became my thing. I'd sit down and write letters and
almost like journaling.
Yes, journaling. My aunt, ironically, when I was a little kid, told me that, it was very important to write things down when you weren't happy. And that's when I got my little diary and a little box she gave me to put paper in. And anytime I didn't feel good, just write things down. And when I did that, I always felt safe after I did it. And I felt better after I did it. So then there became a time when you went to school and things quieted down in your life, and writing became boring because it was about school. But
writing's always been like a salvation for you.
It's been there in the corner where if something was really bothering me, I could find a way through my writing.
So in the 2nd grade, we lose our little baby sister.
Mm-hmm.
Our sister kills herself.
Mm-hmm.
And then your marriage ends.
Yeah. And he kills himself. My first husband, he called me up. He called me up the night he did. I hadn't heard from him for 12 years, and I didn't like the sound of his voice. So I said, are you all right, Lloyd? And he said, well, I need to talk to Laura. And I said, please, I'll give you her number. She would love to talk to you. And he said, well, I got a better idea. Give her a message. tell her I love her. And I says, please come out here, Lloyd. I think she'd really want to see you. I felt in my heart, I know what suicide is. I know that feeling when somebody's lost, and I sensed it, and so I tried so hard to talk with him for about 20 minutes. I got a call from his wife the next morning and said, I needed to call you, Molly, because you need to talk to your daughter. Lloyd last night shot himself at 12:15, and I had just gotten off the phone with him. So again, I was put in the position of somebody in me, wanting to talk to me, and then their life ended, So there was another feeling of guilt, and although I felt I did all I could.
We do have a video rolling in the studio, and if you want to watch our interview on YouTube, you'll be able to see Molly and I having this conversation. Molly, sometimes when things like this happen, one right after the other, how do you save yourself from not falling apart?
I don't know where my strength comes from, except through my faith and through my family support. And I don't know. I get up every day and I say, why, God? My dad used to say, Molly, our family, it's like the Kennedy family. There's like a curse. It just, things happen and we lose our loved ones along the way. It's unbelievable,
Your oldest brother,
yes,
Georgie,
my big brother that I love dearly,
was a Massachusetts state trooper.
Yes.
He was killed when he was 36 years old, married, father of 3 small children. This is a very, very tragic and famous news story here in Massachusetts and actually across the country. He was shot in the line of duty in 1984.
He was.
For many years, you could not talk about his murder.
I actually had panic attacks. I couldn't breathe when I would have to talk about it. And the family had to sustain 3 trials because there were 3 men that jumped upon my brother. Once they shot him, and my brother tried to go to the car and call in, they jumped on his back and shot him directly 3-4 times, shot out the tire. Because of these 3 men, our family endured 3 horrendous trials, where they showed the uniform all bloodied, and we couldn't allow my mother to go, but I sat with my dad through the whole 3 trials in Worcester.
And what was the outcome of the trials?
Well, they were all life in prison. My dad had fought very hard for the death penalty because he used to say we're going to lose the line of our first defense if we don't stop what's happening here and put some fear into the law. And
he was very outspoken.
He was
and
very
seen on
outspoken.
television many
Absolutely,
times.
Yeah.
There is an award that is given every year in Massachusetts, and I've been honored to join your family for 1 year to see this. And it is for those who show bravery in the line of duty and the same kind of bravery that George Hanna showed. Can you tell us about the award?
Well, the award's wonderful because anybody who has done, has had any action, went in and, anything
saved a life. It can be a police officer, right? A firefighter or an EMT, anyone for bravery.
Right. Yeah. Last year, 2 officers were killed. We remember Officer Gannon, and his dog was injured, and I think it was Doc. I can't remember the other officer's name, but both of them had been killed. And my 2 nieces, who go in every single year to give these medals to place them over their necks,
they're George's daughters.
George's daughters. They called me after and they said that was one of the saddest ones to go to because to see the families and the look in their eyes, it was the same feelings that I felt when my dad was killed, And
how did your daughter Laura handle as a child the loss of her uncle in such a horrific way? How do you explain murder to a child?
Well, I always felt my daughter got lost in the family when this was going on. Even when Martha was killed, my sister, when she died, she was there, but I was so traumatized. I couldn't be a mother during those traumatic times. And I see pictures of Laura standing sort of behind, and I just couldn't comfort her because I couldn't comfort myself. But she was strong, and she, once the crowds went away, the 2 of us talked, and she did the best she could. She never understood why so many bad things happened in our family.
When you're a single mom And you've got one child, and it's a daughter.
Yeah.
Boy, are you close. The two of you were like two little peas in a pod.
I lost my friend. Yep.
In your book, you describe yourself as the strong one in your family, the person everyone could lean on. And yet, I believe that took a really strong toll on you. When you look back on it, what do you see?
Yeah, there's no question about it. Things come out in illnesses in different ways. And, I kept so much in because I wanted to be strong. I wanted to be there for my dad. I wanted to be there for all the family that, when anything happened, I was always there. And I would always lay in bed and think about it. And the toll is tremendous.
Well, in fact, there's a couple things that are a result of this. You used to have a lot of panic attacks. And now we know that you have a heart problem called SVT. Can you talk a little bit about that? And do you think it was always related to all these panic attacks?
They don't know how that happens because it's an arrhythmia problem. What's the cause and, whatnot. But I did notice that they started actually showing themselves in my 40s. So, it could possibly be that. But
what does SVT stand for? And tell us a little bit about this.
Ventricular Tachycardia. It's not dangerous. It's not a dangerous. The only problem is when you get older and your heart beats at 400 beats a minute for hours, it wears the heart down. Unless you have an underlying condition, and then it can be harmful. But
what do they do when that happens to you?
You tried the medicines first, and they got to know me at the ER in the Natick Hospital by my first name because I was going to get that stuff injected in my arm to stop it. But anyway, that's what happened. I walked out one day and says, well, I'm getting too familiar around this place. So I'm going to go home and I'm going to look into having that ablation that I had read about. And
So what is the ablation? What do they do?
Ablation, they put you on a table and they put catheters up there and they have some kind of a prong. I don't know how they do it, but you can lay awake and watch the whole thing. And for 3.5 hours, that's what I did. I watched the whole thing. And they race your heart, they pace it, and they get it up to where it starts going into the SVT. And then they have a little instrument that will burn those areas because they have to burn those cells that are causing irregular, action.
Interesting.
In the heart. Yeah, it's very interesting. And the doctor that did this stood behind a wall, and I never realized, but he had cancer. And he was, just so wonderful to me. He'd come out in the middle of all the radiation being done, and he'd put his hand on my on your carotid artery.
On your carotid artery.
Yes, that's right. So to try to get the heartbeat back to normal. I mean, he did, and it was 3 hours. And the amazing thing is, this wonderful nurse came over after I was all done. I was laying there for 3 hours and knew I had to lay for another 6 hours totally still on my back. And that wasn't easy for me to do. But she came over to me and she says, Molly, I want to tell you something. She said, you just did 3 marathons.
That's the equivalent for your heart, right?
That was the equivalent of the heart speed. And I thought, wow, and I didn't even break out a sweat. So,
well, you have a stronger heart than you even realize, right? Emotionally and physically, too.
For sure, so far.
Let's talk about a happy moment in your life, and that is meeting your second husband, Bill, who happens to be sitting out in our waiting room right now. You've said that you got it right the second time.
I got it right.
He is your soulmate. Let's talk about Bill.
Yeah, he's been wonderful to me. He's always been there. He's been there for Laura. We have 2 wonderful grandchildren, and he's been good to them always. And we just have this relationship. We don't have to say anything. He's just so supportive, and he knows what to do before I say anything, and that's always a wonderful thing. He's great.
So along the way, and I know that as a child, you used to tell your mom, something was wrong down there. You had bladder, urinary tract infections all the time. And in your adulthood, this turned into a disease with a nickname IC. Is it interstitial
cystitis?
Interstitial cystitis. Can you tell us what IC is?
IC can be a very devastating chronic illness. It doesn't kill you, but it's sure. I can tell you I ran a large group for over 10 years, and it was the largest in the country. I just knew people needed a place to go and to talk about this disease that the doctors had no optimal treatment. It was unbelievable. So
it was like a support group, right?
it was a support group, and we would have doctors once a year at the forums, and it was very educational, but mostly it was supportive. And I got to say that during the 10-year period, 3 people commit suicide in that with having this disease, because each person, it affects differently. Like all diseases, it affects differently. And there was one gentleman that used to call me all the time and say, I can't take this pain, and I know it's different than yours, but I don't know what to do. And I turned him on to a doctor who it worked for a while. And I got another call, and he was unhappy, and I listened, and I did the best I could. And when the fall forum was coming that year, I thought of him, and I said, gee, I haven't heard from him. And that's when I made a call to his office, because he used to call me from work. He had his own business. And I asked the lady if I could speak with him, and she got very quiet. She said, I wasn't sure she was going to tell me anything. And I said, would you help me with this? I said, I was worried about him during the summer, and I wanted to know how he was doing. And her answer was, well, Molly, he got in his brand new SUV one day, and he just went off into the woods at 100 miles an hour, never put his foot on the brake, and his car blew up when it hit a tree. And I saw the picture in the paper of that whole incident, and I thought I couldn't help him, and I felt really sad. It's another situation I couldn't help, and I knew him, and I just, didn't know what I was going to do. And so I kept on doing this, and that's when the SVT started kicking in, when I was standing up at the podium, and I thought, oh, I can't be doing this anymore because I have to take care of this, making sure.
So you were actually having arrhythmia from your heart while you're standing up at the podium trying to do a good deed for people who have interstitial cystitis like you do.
Right.
What happens to a person with IC?
Okay. What happens is it can affect their whole pelvic area. I mean, everybody's different. Some people have just frequency, but it's constant. It keeps them up all night. Some people have pain without frequency, or both. And the pain is in the pelvic area, and I can tell you, the bladder is filled with nerves, and it's like the emotional side of your brain will respond to that. That's why when you have to go to the bathroom, you respond to that immediately. So when it's in pain, it's an awful pain. It's when you break your arm, it's going to be over, it's going to heal. But when it comes to your bladder, that's, it's different. And actually, Dr. Kevorkian had a movie. They had a movie of him after he passed away. 2 people that he helped take their life they both had IC. They couldn't live with it. That's how bad it was.
It also affects a person's ability to be intimate. Is that not true?
With not all of them, it just depends. But with
so there you go.
Yeah,
so not only are you dealing with a constant pain, but if you're in a loving relationship, you can't even get the relief of having
that's right.
sex with someone that you love,
I know.
right?
It had worked itself out for me. I was pretty lucky.
As parents, we want to do anything we can to take away our children's pain.
Yes.
And your daughter experienced so much loss in her life as well.
She did.
In her 40s, she also developed an illness that is a heart disease, a pulmonary disease.
Pulmonary hypertension. She had a rare form of an autoimmune part of this disease. And she had other things. She had Lyme. They're not even sure whether it was Lyme's disease or the newer kind, but she was really suffering. And she had fibromyalgia, and like you say, Candy, who knows if all the trauma in her life, came out in this way. But she suffered, and my heart was broken even before she passed away, because I knew she was. But she had she knew how to laugh. She never would say on the phone, oh, this is terrible. She would say, hi, Mom. Well, yeah, I'm feeling a little depressed today, but, I know the sun's coming out tomorrow. That's how she always thought, She never...
there's something about losing your child.
Yes.
Before you die.
Oh.
We would do anything to turn the tables. Take me. Don't take my child.
Right.
Even if she's 49 years old, she's your baby.
She is.
Take me back.
My future is gone. That's how that's why no matter what age they are, when they die at that age, your future is gone because that person is no longer there. That piece of you.
You mentioned in your book that after all the adversity that you had gone through, all the loss from the time you were a little girl, people dying all over the place, suicides all over the place, trying to help people who die, who end up taking their own lives. You say in your book, this loss was the one I just didn't think I could get past.
I really didn't think this time. I didn't know how or why or what, but I didn't think I was going to make it. The day after the funeral, I got up. I started just going through the motions of making my bed. I felt nothing. I looked out my window and there was a beautiful red cardinal just flapping his wings. And I thought, oh, that's a cardinal. So I continued making my bed and he was annoying me. I finally said, no, wait a minute. Cardinals, they come to you in spirit, and so I went and sat at the end of the bed and there he was we were looking at each other. And Candy, after that, I felt my faith coming back. And that somehow she was going to come to me and I was going to be able to get through this. And that cardinal is still today, I still get little stories of them,
In fact, as part of the book, Reminiscing La Vie en Rose, there is a chapter which is called The Red-Winged Visitor.
Right.
And that particular story has also been featured in Grief Digest magazine.
That's correct.
There have been many visits by the red-winged bird, have there not?
They have, and they still come. And now my gratitude is coming this way. I have a bird feeder on the window, and a male and a female sit and have lunch with me every single day, so I'm paying them back for what they've done for me.
At one point, as a very young woman, about 20 years old, before you had even had her, you had a dream about losing a daughter.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I never got over that dream either. It was the only part of the dream I remember is that I was standing on ice and I was looking down and her face was looking up at me under the ice with her eyes everything was frozen open. And it scared me so I woke up from that dream, but it was that vivid. And the fact that it woke me up is why I remembered it. And I often wondered, is this
a premonition?
A premonition. And
And recently, or maybe within the last year or so, you had a dream.
I had a visitation.
Tell me.
No question about it. Again, it reaffirmed my faith that God's letting me know. I started saying to myself, and it was only 4 months. I was down in Duxbury. It was only 4 months. And I was still in a lot of pain. And I kept saying to myself, why didn't I hug my daughter more? You know how you have these sort of regrets. And although her husband said to me, Molly, you were always over here.
What are you talking about?
What are you talking about? But anyway, in the dream, her arms came way down in the brightest light. It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. In her face. You know how they've said in many of these afterlife situations that the face is young at a certain age.
That perfect age where you don't even need to wear makeup.
Yeah, she was there. Her face was just glorious. She looked like an angel. And I woke up scared from that too. But it made me realize those long arms meant, Mom,
I'm here.
This is the biggest hug ever. Don't worry. And I got that from that.
There may be someone who is listening to us right now, and they are experiencing the freshness of a deep loss.
Right.
How did you get through it, and what advice can you give to someone who's experiencing this?
We can't get through it. At least I couldn't get through it without my faith, my family, and knowing that I wasn't alone. I mean, I found myself searching for these groups, just as I did when I had interstitial cystitis, that, I have to feel the pain of other mothers so that I know that I'm going to be able to make it through this. And I tell everybody, don't let anybody tell you to get over your grief, to move on, because you won't be able to. It's just about getting through. And every day, I'm going into my second year, which is more raw when I feel my daughter's gone. However, I feel as though I'm getting better with the way I grieve, and it does get better. But nobody grieves the same. Everybody grieves differently, and you're allowed to. So don't let anybody take that away.
I had a very wise priest say this to me once, and I wanted to pass it along to you. He said, the amount we grieve is always equal to the amount we have loved.
Absolutely.
And so when you have loved someone deeply,
Yeah.
how could you ever expect to get over it quickly?
It doesn't happen. With a child.
And does it ever happen? Do you ever get over the loss of someone in your life?
No, you really don't. And I got to tell you that a child is even different. The pain goes deeper. It's into your soul and into your heart. And I've never before, through all my losses, I got up and I did what I was supposed to do. But when I lost my daughter, sometimes I'm in the house and I scream when I think of her, never seeing her again, how awful that is to never see her again. And I have to let out a little scream and be grateful my windows are down in the house.
What has been the biggest lesson for you?
The lesson of life.
Yeah.
I mean, this was what, I don't know, did God give me this life to make me strong and get through all the adversities? He had to do it this way? I don't know. I'll never know. But I hope one day I get to ask him.
What is mother love?
Mother love is unconditional. It is unconditional. It is something, it's a bond that can't be broken.
People struggle with what to say when someone dies.
They do. They really do. Every person has looked at me and said, I can't imagine. And then when I look at their face, it's like looking at a deer in the headlights. They truly don't know what to say. And I was in the same place one time, so I understand. So I always find by changing the conversation, saying, yeah, I'm hanging in there, and changing the conversation is about the best thing to do at the time, because people don't really know how to handle sometimes the grief.
There are so many lines in your book that I love, but one of them is, by sharing your strength to be a survivalist, you have given people a roadmap of how to get through adversity. Is adversity a great teacher?
Oh, it is. It is. It's something that when these things happen, you say, why? But when things happen again, you're ready because you've done it. You've done it. It's like climbing a mountain. I'm almost there. I'm almost there. Maybe the next time, but it is. It's through adversity that you get your strength.
In the very beginning of our conversation, I described the book as a memoir that's filled with humor and heartbreak and inspiration. And one of the reasons why it is filled with humor is because you decided that, when we all look at our past, particularly when we look at our childhood, we can sometimes look back and see our lives through rose-colored glasses.
That's it.
When an obstacle is in your path, how do you get around it?
Well, first I kick it. No, when an obstacle gets in my way, I try to not look at it like an obstacle. I try to say, I can figure this out. Something, the only obstacle I can say that's been the hardest in my life is losing my daughter. There's no other obstacle that was as hard as that. I just, every single day I get up and say, I just hope I see another day, because, my heart is with her. And although I have a lovely husband that's keeping me here. And I have to also say, I have 2 beautiful grandchildren. So I'll climb any obstacle to keep them in my life. They're wonderful, wonderful kids.
Success means different things to different people at different times in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And this story of heartbreak and yet survival has me asking you the question, how do you define success? What is success for you now?
Well, success for me is just making sure that when I get up every day, I find a purpose in life. It has to be a purpose. And then if that's there, I can reach out and help others that are going through the same. And that's my feeling of success.
Molly Hanna Glidden, my good friend. I'm so glad we finally got a chance to sit down together and tell your story.
Absolutely.
And it leaves me breathless because you have accomplished so many things in your life.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you.